Hey everybody, welcome back to BitBoy Crypto. Today we are joined by another YouTuber that you may know, Blockchain Brad. How are you doing, man?
Mate, thank you so much. From Australia, I know about you. You're a very prominent character, literally a comic character almost. So thanks, mate. I really appreciate being on the channel.
Yeah, definitely. So it's good I'm a comic character, but my wife says it's hard for her to take me seriously. So that's not good, right?
That's a good thing. Still a kid at heart.
Yeah. So you're in Australia, right?
Right. Yep.
So what is something that I want to ask you about? Kind of what is the environment of cryptocurrency in Australia? Because I hear mixed things. I hear like you got, I think, Power Ledger that signed like a deal with the government with Power, but then like the Austrac is like your SEC and they're like really tough on crypto. What is kind of the lay of the land,
Well,
in Australia?
it's a really good question. I mean, there's a few different parts to the position that we have in crypto. One of them is that we're quite progressive from a government standpoint. So we want to really endorse blockchain. We actually have a lot of prominent enterprises currently engaging with the potentials of blockchain now. But when it comes to crypto, that's a different conversation. And you're absolutely right. Things like Power Ledger, it had a lot of potential, to really lead out its use case, to really build out the potential of a new narrative for how we engage with new and alternative means of transmitting value and transactions for value with utilizing either grids or other alternative means of power generation. But fundamentally, I think the people's the real power in Australia. Per capita, we have so many proponents of crypto. The big challenge is that how that fits with blockchain, how that fits with real use cases. We're still in that space now, Ben, where or BitBoy, as you're known.
Either is
it's
good.
It's a tough scenario right now because people are still trying to work out globally how all of this plays out. But certainly, the Aussies are really strong when it comes to the meetups, when it comes to community building, when it comes to trying to really have a voice. When you look at people like Alex Saunders from Nuggets News, he's a great guy. Yeah. He's a great person also to talk to about this because he's directly involved in some of the decision making even at the government level. But what we've both noticed is that there's been actually a bit of a question mark placed on some of these tokens that have emerged, whether they be from an Aussie project or outside of that. So there's a bit of a current sense from the government of caution. They're erring on that side to make sure they get the assessments right, to make sure regulation has a serious point to play. But when it comes to engagement, what I do like is that we have third parties now, strong ones such as Living Room with Satoshi and others, in which you can start to engage with crypto for the real world. Yeah. And there are very few countries actually doing it as much as we are. So I'm pretty proud of how the Aussies are going.
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting. I've got a lot of people in my community from Australia. It's just kind of, why do you think Australia is very prone, and the individuals, the citizens of Australia are prone to be interested in cryptocurrency? Because like in America, they're not, outside of, a younger generation that may be going to like, Georgia Tech's a local college here that probably has a lot of people that are trying to be engineers and understand what cryptocurrency is. But our normal citizen in America, probably in the rest of the world, like you guys just think that, a lot of us just walk with our heads in the clouds up here and don't know anything. But, why do you think Australia is more prone for people to be interested in a tech like cryptocurrency?
That's an interesting question. I never really thought about it, but I think there's a likeness between the Aussie spirit and trying to sort of change the status quo, if you will. Yeah. Like there's a lot of, we're isolated, by geography as well, being an island down under. But there's also, this strong movement towards.
I like that you said down under. I like that. That's good.
Down under, mate.
I'm glad you worked that into the interview. That's perfect.
Yeah, and I have to put g'day in there somewhere as well. And crikey. But, I think at the end of the day, a lot of the blokes from 20 to 30 years old, they just want to really see a different, opportunity. And Australia, but through its history, has come from a nation of literal builders. Those who haven't come from the white collar, they've come from sort of disadvantaged backgrounds all the way back to the convict era. So there is a bit of a mentality, in our culture to try and sort of thwart the current top-down means of thinking, to try and challenge the regime, if you will. And perhaps that's part of the narrative why this is so attractive. But I also think that Aussies are natural. The young guys, anyway, they're willing to take a punt. Per capita, I think we're some of the most vocal people when it comes to our lifestyle. Like a lot of guys will go down the pub, very social.
When you say take a punt, that's interesting. You said that phrase. What do you mean by that?
Well, with crypto, there's still a degree of speculation. There's still a degree of the crypto casino. So for Aussies, we'll tend to be quite adventuresome. We'll go out and travel the world.
It's interesting you say that, and I'm going to point something out. I'm going to stop you right there, because in America, when we say we're going to punt that, we actually mean the exact opposite. We mean we're going to take a step back and we're going to go back to the drawing board. But when you say take a punt, you mean go forward and be adventurous.
Yeah, I mean, take a risk.
Yeah, so because in America, in American football, when you have fourth down, which is the last time you can try to move the ball, and if you don't, make it a certain number of yards, the other team gets it. So you have the option to punt the ball and kick the ball further downfield, so they don't have good field position. So it's actually like the exact opposite. So I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, we have real football in Australia, not your football.
We call it real football here, so just so you know.
Yeah, no. And then a lot of the South Americans and the English guys will say real football's with a round ball. But, at the end of the day,
yours is much closer than theirs.
Yeah, well, it's funny, all these different terms for different regions. But for us, usually punt just refers to taking a risk. And in crypto's case, I think, that's a fair sort of analysis, because especially now in 2019, we're starting to see that there's less proof in the crypto pudding, in terms of the majority of the startups that we've seen emerge haven't really proven themselves. And so evidenced by startups like Dogecoin, for example, many are still willing to accept sort of that apathetic and complacent model of, she'll be right, mate. That's the Aussie attitude of, it doesn't matter if it hasn't got the tech, she'll be right. We can just, know that we're in this for the long term and having a bit of fun. So there's different ways in which people can color and imbue crypto. And one of them is, that lighthearted side. And Aussies, they tend to be willing to give things a crack, as we say. Yeah. So you're getting all the idioms from me today,
But I think that was very interesting, though, that we found an idiom that we both use that means the exact opposite thing. Like, you hear about stuff, like, I don't know. I always heard, like, if the OK symbol is like the giving somebody the bird in some country, maybe Brazil or something. It's like you hear those things, but you don't really see them in action. We just saw it. Everybody, cultural. You saw an idiom that means exact opposites in Australia.
Yeah, there's so many words I didn't know that are unique to certain regions like Australia. Like, I think there's another word you don't use, which is heaps. But when we talk about a lot of something, we'll say, there's heaps of cryptos, for example, out there. But you guys don't do that, apparently.
We don't really. I mean, it's a word we have, but we don't really use it. I mean, that's another thing is, like, there are words that you may understand what it means, but certain countries use them in different ways, so we don't say heaps. If we use the word heaps, it's like, it's got to be a ton of something,
yeah, like haystacks.
But still, like, I would say, that's a ton of hay. Like, I still wouldn't say, look at all the heaps of hay,
Right. Okay. Got it. I love the accent there. The very un-Australian.
I only have one accent. That's it. Like my English, my British, my Chinese, like, all my accents are the exact same. So my wife makes so much fun of me for that, because she says I'm terrible.
I think at the end of the day, though, you raise a really good point, though, Ben, is that these differences, that we're talking about, we're making a bit of fun about our cultural nuances, but they really do shape even how we work in crypto, because,
absolutely.
How we value a certain startup might be regionally specific, or it's really interesting to see how the power of politics even plays out in crypto itself. And that can be geographically bound. A good example of this is there's a predominance right now of BTC being valued as an SOV in many Western regions, or those that are developed, such as the US, at my country of Australia, or in Europe in some regions. But then when you think of it from a use case of need, use case of transaction, then you get different regions of the world where they're advocating for that to be something of, something different, something where they can essentially move out of their currencies and into something that's a solution. So it's fascinating to see the narratives play out and the power of that to really influence, I guess, the position in social media of that particular asset.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even the way different, like we were talking, I think before we went on air about, Americans, like we kind of have like kind of this just egotistical air about us that other places don't have. So, you might watch an American influencer and they might talk about something, and the way that they're talking about it, culture, like with their cultural background put into that, like it might seem more excited than someone from a different country who might be telling you information about this project. You're like, oh, that guy doesn't really care about that project that much. We're just animated here. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I remember in the Olympics one year, because obviously you guys win almost every Olympics, and almost every single.
We're the best at everything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you just encapsulated. Well, you just stole my thunder.
If we wanted to beat everyone in soccer, we'd take all our best athletes out of our other sports, and we'd beat you all in soccer.
Right. Well, see that, you literally just stole my thunder in saying that you'll typically get that response from almost every American, in the Olympic, I guess, Olympic team, because many of them will walk past and go USA #1. But I will tell you this, is the Aussies we revel in that, because we like to be the underdog. We like to come up and surprise the shit out of you.
You're down under, so it makes sense.
Yeah. But when we do beat the Yanks in anything, we love that, because we love our sport. Well, you know what I mean, though.
I do. I'm just kidding.
At the end of the day, we love when we surprise people, with our
You beat one of our swimming, I think, in the last Olympics. You had a good swimmer that beat some of our Americans. I remember that. I'm still holding it against you. But
Ian Thorpe smashed you back in the day, and
I think our thing is, I mean, I'm kind of kidding, obviously, with the stuff I'm saying, but I mean, I'm kind of not too, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's just in America, we're so ingrained with patriotism and just to love our country and things like that it just comes out in different ways. But then also just because of, America's the #1 economy, in the world and stuff. I mean, most people here, even our people who live in poverty are much better off than a lot of other places whose people live in poverty and things like that. I think a lot of times we just don't we don't appreciate on the day-to-day as much as we probably should about stuff.
And mate, this is such a fascinating conversation when we move into the sort of what brings us in to the cryptosphere, because when it gets all the way back to the roots of it really does rest with capitalism in these regions, because even a lot of the documentation, a lot of the research, a lot of the documentaries that are put forward about capitalism, they do tend to come from the US, a lot of it, because a lot of that ideology was born there, or really promoted in that context for various reasons. So the big question then becomes, does the whole world have the same capitalistic agenda? I don't think so. But certainly from the US, there's a very strong and proud sense of pro-capitalism, that it is certainly something that it's free market, it's free for all, and your work and your labor will determine your worth. But the big question is, does that actually translate into the context of crypto? Is it necessarily about proof of work in terms of how much effort you put into your research? I don't know. All I can tell you is I don't think so. I think there are too many complexities to simply translate it in that way.
Yeah, and it is odd, because I think people that know my channel would probably will not be a surprise to them. I don't talk about, I recently just did a political video where I talked about Patrick Byrne. Do you know anything about that situation?
No, not a lot. I've heard the name, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, he's the founder of Overstock.com, and he recently basically said he was involved in spying on Russia for the government, for the United States government. Like, it's a really crazy story. It gets pretty political, but I'm pretty conservative politically. I think that it wouldn't surprise anyone. Now the people in our country that are the most liberal, like, they're all like redistribution of wealth, like socialism, all these things. But yet crypto, like, I consider myself to be more libertarian. I would say that in between libertarian and conservative, center right libertarian, I guess I would say. But like, I'm all for cryptocurrency redistributing wealth. Like, it kind of goes against what I stand for politically, but I do believe that cryptocurrency has a chance to be the largest redistribution of wealth, in the history of the world. And why I think that it's a good thing is because that redistribution of wealth is basically, it's not taking from capitalists who have businesses and are making money and doing things. It's just basically cutting out an entire industry, which is banking. Banking is the biggest industry in the world, or money is the biggest industry in the world. And if through cryptocurrency and doing things peer-to-peer and being able to trust each other instead of having to trust a third party, the way I explain it to people is, when you go and you spend money at the store on a credit card, you use that credit card and you get charged a fee, an interest from your credit card company, or a monthly fee, whatever it might be. Then on the other side, the guy taking the money, he's getting charged a fee from the same company that just charged you a fee. And if we could just kind of remove that middleman from all of our transactions, then I think that will be a huge redistribution of wealth. And instead of just the old banking families making more and more and more money, then that money can go to places where it's needed, third world countries, right, or, whatever it might be. So,
and apparently even in the US and certainly in Australia in the last 20 years or recent decades, at least, that we've seen the increase in wealth for the few. So that wealth disparity has been increasing in your country. So even more reason why there's that social unrest, that political unrest for the disenfranchised, the marginalized, and often it's the young people. In your case, the expense of education and health, for example, is immense. Whereas in my country, the tax system is quite different. The tax system is we pay a lot of tax, some of the highest in the world, and much like you said, the likes of Denmark and other countries that are quite progressive in that sense. So I did want to ask you that when you are so pro people, when you are so pro borderless and pro peer-to-peer essentially with technology, whether that be for the narrative of trying to support wealth acquisition or whether that be about trying to enable borderless currencies, what about things like tax? And I ask this seriously because how do we enable goods and services like hospitals, the continuation of road construction, schools being built? How do we ensure that we reinvest from, in our economies if we take that ultra-libertarian ideal of pure borderless, seamless sharing of wealth?
It's a great question.
When the human condition tells us a different story.
It's a great question. I believe in a small government. I believe in a limited government. I don't believe in a government that is overreaching and demands, people that are making the, in the upper echelon of society pay back more than half of what they make per year, even if they need it or not. Like, I don't feel like that's the government's role. And I think if we go back in America, if you were to go back to the 1800s, you would see that the tax system was a lot different and people weren't paying as much and things were still getting done. And I think that really, if you look at, here's a great example. Prisons, jails. We'll call them jails. Okay. And I don't know what you guys have there in Australia, but in America, if you commit a crime that is a misdemeanor, which means it carries less than 1 year of incarceration, then you go to jail. If it's a felony, which means something that carries more than a year, you go to prison. So our jails are terrible. Like, they're really bad. They're probably much better than a lot of countries. I know they're much better than Russian jails. I've seen videos on Netflix, but the jails are bad, and they're overcrowded, and there's a lot of people in there that probably may or may not deserve to be there, but they're not good conditions. However, there are private jails in America that are run by private companies. They're more partners to the government instead of actual. Instead of being funded by the government pays them to run their private company. And those jails are 100 times better than the ones ran by the counties. I believe in private business. I think private business solves a lot of our problems. I think that if there was a private DOT here, which is the Department of Transportation, roads would get built in months instead of years. And so that's kind of my view on it. Is I think that private businesses can solve a lot of the problems. I think if you look at our healthcare system, and I know this because I used to be, we were talking about, once again, before we came on air, we talked about a lot of stuff before we went on air. About, I used to work for a nonprofit drug rehab for teenage boys. I was the executive director there. And so I dealt with a lot of, medical billing companies and things like that. And, they tell 90% of medical bills in America don't get paid. 90% of them do not get paid. That's why, my kid had to go to the emergency room. He busted his head a couple weeks ago. He's totally fine. But we thought he had to get stitches, took him to the emergency room. And it was $1,300 for them to tell him he didn't need stitches.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He was literally there for 30 minutes. And all that happened was they said, "No, we actually don't think he needs stitches." So they didn't even do anything. It was $1,300.
So what about insurance? I thought, there's health insurance is very expensive in the US, but don't a lot of people try to get it or?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just telling you what they sent us from the bill.
Oh,
I mean, it definitely.
that's such a lot.
Yeah, you usually a lot of times will see the bill anyways before the insurance hits it.
Oh, okay.
Or sometimes you do. So, especially if you don't have your insurance card at the time, then they'll send you the bill and then you forward it on. It's a really crazy system that we have here with that kind of stuff. But I think that our Medicare system here is really, really, really bad. And I think that a lot of the money that goes to assist people that are on Medicare, the doctors have to cover those at lower costs, than they cover patients that are on health insurance or people that have no insurance. I think it's just kind of a convoluted system where it appears that it's like, oh, our healthcare is just really high and blah, 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 blah. But the thing is the government has messed that up too. So
I see. And it also puts things into perspective when you hear these stories as well, Ben, because, from my country, I can't think of, when I've had to spend a lot of money to go and see a doctor because so many of the services are provided through the tax system. That's what we pay our high tax for, is so that we can have all these goods and services available to the people. But we are fortunate in being isolated, a small population. But we've also had the advantages of seeing other countries like yours do certain things, and certainly healthcare has been one in which we've tried to model away from, the challenges that you're talking about, so that we can have, a good quality of life, well-being protected. So it brings it back to crypto for a second, because how do we ensure the continuation of that prosperity, that social prosperity, of that emotional prosperity that we invest in people, if the narrative is primarily economic when we're talking about crypto?
Yeah, that's definitely a really loaded question. I think that when it comes to the entire crypto landscape and, kind of what we're all doing here, I think we're just trying to change a system that's broken. I think that's all it boils down to. We're trying to change a system that is broken. Our financial system, we have two extremes, right? We got capitalism right here. Here, I'm trying to put it on the screen. Capitalism. Right. And we have socialism. We got these two polar opposites. And you got people on one side that say, okay, even though pure socialism has never really worked before, we can give it another try and let's go for it. And then you got people on the other side, they're like, we've tried that before. We definitely, capitalism, it may not be right. It may not be perfect. Sorry, I just shook myself here. It may not be perfect, but it's way better than that. And I think that maybe there's a different way. Maybe there's something different in trying. In America, we talk a lot about abolishing the two-party system we have in here with Democrats and Republicans. Everybody pretty much agrees that would probably be the best thing, would be to bring more parties in, so that way we don't have basically a binary choice all the time.
And you have a bit more democracy. Because a lot of and you have a lot more democracy coming up through the ranks, because what's interesting, and you were mentioning this before when we were talking, is the power of social media to band people together, to really create new narratives. That's never been as powerful as it is today. And we're even seeing that in your youth. I have never been involved with American politics before, but there are some people who are just shining a light in a different way in your country that's so exciting. And they're doing that because of getting together in collectives and being reactive to the status quo, to that binary system. I think that's a great exemplar for the whole world. To start believing in our youth, to start to listen and say, hey, there are alternatives. And I think crypto really befits that, way of thinking, is that we are just ripe and ready for change.
Yeah, but maybe we're not the ones who are actually going to see it. There's a story in the Bible about Moses leads people out of Egypt, and he's supposed to lead them into the promised land, and he makes some mistakes and he never actually gets to see the promised land, but his people go there. And not to get religious about it, but in cryptocurrency, that may be the way that it is. Maybe us that are on here on the forefront of this have been involved in cryptocurrency for a long time and are pushing these narratives and saying, look, guys, this is a new way we need to change things. Maybe there's something in between, capitalism and socialism. Maybe it's not always a binary choice. Maybe we can do something to empower the people, but maybe it's the new generation that will come in behind us with the youth that will be the actual people that will be able to see the fruits of all the stuff that we're trying to do now.
And then maybe it's for want of walking. the fact that you're making that transition, you're literally making the progress step by step. I think that's where the real value is in this crypto conversation too, because right now, the best thing about you and I in having this conversation is we both acknowledge we don't have the answers.
Right.
We don't know what's going to happen around the corner, but we are certainly willing to jump in and take part, participate in the possibility and the prospecting of value. Because one of the things that is tough for me is day in, day out, questioning whether or not the high percentage of speculation, is determining the true nature of this environment, questioning the crypto casino. But it's because of that prospect of light, at the end of the tunnel, the prospect of value there that holds me, almost like, an addiction, because I do want to believe in the benevolence. I want to believe in the altruism and the goodness of this as well. And I also want to believe that the technology has genuine value to do good and distribute wealth in ways that are actually not fair, because I think that's an implausibility. I think that that's just socially and subjectively determined. But I do want to see the previous regimes be changed so that the opportunities arise, so that most importantly we see more autonomy, we see more choice, and we see more of grassroots movements to effect change.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely something, change is something that is undeniable, and I don't know, do you know what, this is kind of on topic, but not.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what Moore's Law is?
No, I don't.
So I recently learned about this. It's something that I feel like a lot of people actually know about, and I had never even heard of it. In computer technology, it basically says that every 2 years, and I don't know when this law was established, it's not like a legal law, I guess more of a theory. Every 2 years, technology, the rate of it literally doubles. So like, if you go back to when we had, single core processors for computers, like 2 years later, they became dual core. And then 2 years later, they became quad core. And then they call them like the i8s or whatever it is. Now, technology is changing so fast, they've actually said that is no longer valid. It's actually moving faster than that law, And the world is rapidly changing around us. And technology is definitely leading that change. And I think that's a big reason why I believe that cryptocurrency is the future. And even though people can't see it right now, people outside of our echo chamber that we live in, where we talk about things like, moons and Lambos and things like that. We live in this echo chamber where we all believe that, like, whether it's, Bitcoin's going to be gold or whether it's going to be currency, like we believe that cryptocurrency at some point will take over. And I do think that's
so true.
Yeah.
Mate, it's so true. And I'm so glad that you raised that point of echo chamber, because sometimes for want of improving our own stacks, our sat stacks even, sometimes we can't see what's really going on because we have those rose-colored glasses, or we have that filter through our own investment. And the reality is that now we're in this situation where there's a lot of infighting, there's a lot of reciprocal sort of or bouncing ideas from each other, but it's not always a friendly environment. Yeah. A lot of the time it's very maximalist by design. And for that reason, the question is that problematic to the overall success and the flourishing of this ecosystem, to really build up what we want to see? Because are we our own demise? Are we actually not seeing that by not banding together and by not working more productively for the common goal of affecting the kind of change we've been alluding to, are we at risk of destroying the fabric and destroying the integrity of the ethos that it started with?
We could. I mean, we've been given the keys to the kingdom, and it's up to us to either do it well or destroy it. And to me, like, human nature always tends to destroy things. So we've seen it, time and time again since the beginning of the world. And, I think that crypto is definitely one of those things. I've talked a lot about how, we all talk about crypto like it's great, but I mean, blockchain technology can actually be used for a lot of bad too. And I'm not talking about like, people buying drugs or human trafficking, with Bitcoin. Like we actually all know who are in the space, that's actually not good because Bitcoin's traceable. So even though the people outside of crypto think that's what it's used for, but I mean more in terms of like, keeping people's social profiles permanently on the blockchain. Like if somebody gets arrested when they're 17 and it goes on the blockchain and they apply for a job when they're 60, like it's still there and people can go back and look at it. And it's like your permanent record is your permanent record, even if you change as a person. So And then we look at somewhere like China, that could definitely, gosh, I said that like Donald Trump right there. China. I didn't mean to. That was an accident.
But I see what you mean is the risk of that immutability can be, it can breach the privacy of people. And that's what Andreas Antonopoulos talks about. He's an advocate for transparency, he's an advocate for the blockchain, but he's certainly saying that there's rights as human beings. We have to our own privacy, and we should be able to interact in our society knowing that we have our rights protected. But the big question, I suppose, is, the movement of the narrative itself. What are your thoughts, Ben, on how we've seen everything change and morph from that very idealistic, libertarian ideal we saw in the beginning to now what we see? Because it's difficult to even articulate the kind of convoluted scenario we see now, but it's certainly not that initial cyberpunk ideology that we were sold into.
Yeah, it's money. I mean, that's what it all boils down to. A movement is only as pure as the people who are behind it. And at some point, it definitely becomes something where people are financially motivated. I mean, we're lucky in a lot of ways. I don't know. Actually, this week we found out who Satoshi was, right? Did you see that story?
Well, I saw that again.
Yeah, it's such a joke, right? We're so blessed in cryptocurrency that the leader of our entire space, who created cryptocurrency basically, is most likely dead. And if he's not dead, then at this point, like, it's pretty well established, he's probably not going to reappear.
Right.
I personally think he is probably dead, and that's a logical conclusion.
And the thing is, knowing whether his identity, does it really matter at the end of the day? Because obviously the key is, what the technology was designed to do. So I really wanted to ask you that as well, Ben. Do you feel that there's an issue of convenience for many of the proponents, depending on what camp they're in, for their own to essentially shield their own agenda?
Of
because
course.
We've seen all different ideologies emerge since the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, a lot of different camps. I mean, I think Ripple is a really great example of that, where, Ripple is their community is so strange. Like, I'm just going to say it. I don't talk bad about Ripple on my channel, really, because I feel like there's enough people out there that do that. I've made my, opinion on it pretty clear. Like, I just think at the end of the day, Bitcoin and XRP can't both survive. It doesn't make sense, because if Bitcoin or another currency becomes the world currency, then it solves the borderless, the cross-border transactions. Like, it's solved. Like, we don't need, if somebody is using cryptocurrency as like the main store of value in the world, or the main currency of the world, whether it's Libra coin or Bitcoin or this Chinese CBDD or CBDC coin, whatever it is, then that means people aren't using fiat currency. Then what's the point of it? Like, that's what I say. But the community itself is so weird, because, and not necessarily the individuals, but it's like this walled off crypto community. That's like, they have their own stories going around in their community and their own ethos, as you said, where like the different creators, like, they just create content for Ripple, and people outside of XRP and Ripple don't even know this world exists. The $589 Ripple, where people were talking about for a long time, became a big meme. Like, that was circulating like well within the XRP community before anyone outside of it had even knew that it was a thing, And so that's from the community side. But then you also have the corporate side of Ripple, which Ripple's a great company. I mean, you might not like their morals or what they're doing, but I mean, it's got history, right? It's got strong leadership. It's got strong connections, partnerships, good marketing. Like, it's a good corporate structure, but they're obviously going to push this narrative of like, well, we're still going to need this XR. You're going to need this X Rapid to be able to send your money back and forth,
And you raise a really good point, because often when it's a corporate sort of agenda, they'll often push for that utility model, or that utility token in this case, to really have some sort of semblance of value by decree, from the top down. But the biggest question is, though, Ben, is that in these scenarios where you see corporations emerge with significant raises, such as, in the case of Ripple, often, there's the challenge is then trying to prove the veracity of that token to be what it purports to be as a utility. Because often in those scenarios, they're implementing permission systems, for example, Hyperledger as one use case, or Corda, or there's so many that we can, articulate in that sort of framework of permission systems that are interoperating between those corporate entities, to try and really promote the value of blockchain, but not necessarily perhaps the value of tokenized economies and public permissionless systems. So the big question is the case of need sometimes. Do some of these systems even need to have that utility? And do you think that perhaps the SEC is going to eventually start to differentiate between different parties?
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I think the SEC has got their hands full right now with a lot of stuff, and that's a good question. You know, will the SEC go after a lot of large companies we've heard of? Because to this point, they've only gone after Ken, which, I mean, if you're in crypto, you know Ken. If you're outside of crypto, you have no idea what it is. If I said Kick Messenger, like in year 13, you might have heard of it in America, but someone my age has never heard of Kick Messenger. I only know what it is because I'm young at heart. No.
And as you know, that was a raise of convenience because of the possibilities of the crowdfunding. And that's the challenge as well, is that sometimes...
Well, that's what the SEC says. Like they're actually, you know, the allegation that Ken is really pushing against that and actually saying that, you know, the SEC is using that narrative to make them look bad in public opinion. So people like you and me say, the SEC said they did it out of convenience, you know, or they were running out of money. So it's just hard to really know what the truth is because I'm not entrenched on either side.
And I think the fact that you're raising the question is exactly what you need to do, because you can't take either side, you know, as gospel. It has to be a case of your own individual due diligence, your research. So it's great that you're raising the question for the audience as well. But in the case of need, I think that that's just a conversation that needs to continue as well, Ben, because we don't question enough about the real value of a utility token. We don't even question the terminological conundrum that is a utility token, because sometimes we need to ask, what does it actually mean? What does it mean to be utility in the context of that ecosystem that they're building? Are they replicating the white paper? Are they actually going to build something that has a real proof of need beyond the token itself? And most don't, to be honest. Most systems, most startups right now, they're falling by the wayside because of the dearth of proof. Post raise, post shill, post market making.
It also doesn't help them that they raised all the money when money was good and now all the money's dried up and the price has gone down. I mean, it's really terrible timing that the peak of ICOs was pretty much the crash, you know? So
right.
The older projects like Ethereum, like they're still sitting in a pretty good position, but a lot of the newer ones, you know, they took really, really, really big hits.
Right, but what are your thoughts though? Let's talk about tech for a second. And that neither of us are techies by credentials and by training. But when it comes to just that tendency for each major iteration of technological evolution, each of those tech bubbles that we see emerge in history, often the case is that the first iteration is just that. It's the first, and then we see development from that to eventual emergence of tech that has mass adoption. Now, because Bitcoin led a new narrative with cryptographic proof to really stimulate a new, possibility for tokenized economies. Do you think, though, that the crudeness of its systems are going to be its impediment when it comes to things like scalability, when it comes to things, like speed?
Well, I think that one good thing about Bitcoin is that over time, they've done a really good job at developing it slowly. And so that they haven't been quick to jump on, the developers haven't been quick to jump on, bandwagons like, oh, someone talking about Mimblewimble can make it private again. Let's go ahead and add it and let's do that right now. Like, they're really slow to change things. And I actually think like a lot of people look at that as a disadvantage, but I actually think it's an advantage because they're able to kind of like really breathe and make good decisions about what they want to, add into Bitcoin. But I will show you the shirt. This is my favorite shirt. My wife bought this for me a couple weeks ago. It says, Make it a Blockbuster night. Do you guys have Blockbuster in Australia, or did you at one time?
We did. It's slowly dying, but we did.
It's slowly dying. Well, in America, it's totally dead. So
okay, I might be dead now.
There's one Blockbuster left in America, and it's in Oregon. And there's a really interesting Netflix documentary on it. And the manager of the store actually goes to Walmart every Tuesday morning at the moment when the new DVDs are released for the week from the new movies that go from the theater into DVD. And she personally goes there and buys them because there's no corporate store. Like there's no corporation now. Like she doesn't get it from anywhere else. She has to actually go manually buy or physically buy them and put them back in. But to me, I love this shirt so much because I talk about Blockbuster a lot. I worked at Blockbuster in, I would say 1999. I think I worked in Blockbuster. I was 17 years old. And I would just work there, rewinding tapes. You know what I mean? Rewinding tapes. DVDs had just came out, so our DVD section was only like two little sections because there was one DVD of each movie. That's all that we got. And, I talk about Blockbuster a lot because I say this. What was the safest job in America in 1995? I've said this on the channel like 100 times. Blockbuster manager. Who would have ever thought that Blockbuster would totally implode in like 15 years, be totally gone? It was the only movie store. When Blockbuster came to town, it destroyed all your local video stores. Like they were done because Blockbuster was such a behemoth, and they had the chance to buy Netflix. I don't know if you know that. They had a chance to buy Netflix very early on for, I think, a few million, like 7 million or something. And they were like, no, this thing's stupid, and you saw it happen. And so I think it's important to remember at all times. I'm going to use this shirt as an object lesson many, many, many times now that my wife bought me this shirt, because it's just a constant reminder that things change and that if you don't hop on new technology, you can become obsolete very fast. And I would assume that while the actual market cap of Blockbuster probably at its peak was not near, what Bitcoin's was at like, $300 or $400 billion, whatever it is. I think you could poll people in the world, and people probably at that time had a lot more faith in Blockbuster lasting as a company than people right now in the world think Bitcoin is going to last.
I think you raise a really good point. And given that the ecosystem of those who are active participants, like you and I and many of the listeners, that's relatively small, per capita, and the percent extremely small.
Crazy.
But given what we know of the volatility of the space and the sentiment right now, and this analogy of Blockbuster, I'm sensing from you, that you're very much aware of the fragility of the space, and also of the way in which many of these maximalists or even the Bitcoiners are really resting on the power of networks and the power of the media itself, because the shilling of any of the startups, including BTC as, that organic startup from the outset, is still there. So what are your thoughts on the power of the people to really uplift value through the social media that we all use and love to discuss and share value?
That's really all it's got. I think. I think that's pretty much all Bitcoin has. If you were to remove the social, I would say this: if it wasn't for social media, Bitcoin wouldn't exist. Period. It wouldn't even exist. Like the Bitcoin Talk Forum would not have been enough to get Bitcoin going. Yeah, it would be dead by now, I believe. So
in that sense, though, Ben, it's a great point you made. And what does it mean for the token then? If we regard it as that anomalous utility token, if you just deconstruct that term, where's the utility in a system that is where it's fundamentally built on belief and the transfer of belief as the asset? Do you know what I mean?
I think that's a hard question though, because you could really make that case about the dollar as well.
Absolutely.
It's just on belief. That's all that we have. We have nothing backing it at this point. At some point, there might have been something backing it, but I always say, if someone from someone was raised by wolves in the Amazon rainforest before it started burning. If someone was raised by wolves there, if there are even wolves there, I don't even know. And they come out of the Amazon rainforest and they see a green piece of paper on the ground, what are they going to think that is? They're going to think it's art. They're going to think it's a picture. They're not going to have any idea that green piece of paper has any value.
For fire.
For fire, yeah. Yeah, what can I use this for? When the zombie apocalypse hits, the only thing that's going to be good is going to be services, food, and firearms. You know what I mean? So currency won't do you a lot of good in an apocalypse type situation. Not really a zombie apocalypse, but maybe. I don't know. But
so do you think that utility then is something of future value? Because it's always a challenge to me to really understand and conceptualize what the intent is behind that term. Is it a term of convenience? When we know for sure right now that one of the fundamental assets of Bitcoin, regardless of other narratives that are built in, is actually belief. And in that, a tough question added to it is, when we've seen past monetary systems, quickly we see government or some sort of enterprise support. Some major player is involved in trying to promote its value to the people. This is the opposite scenario where it's a grassroots movement. Do you think that BTC needs to have more than that grassroots, people's-oriented system to succeed?
Well, I think we're kind of already seeing some of that, though. Here is kind of how I see things setting up right now with the U.S. government. I see Libra coin that may or may not launch. The government has not been scared of Bitcoin. They have not been. They have been terrified and shaken to the core by Libra coin. And so much so that actually now there are senators and congressmen that are pushing Bitcoin and saying, this is the example of what, digital currency can be and have value, and you can't ban it. It's open source code. We've seen a lot of congressmen and senators here say that. And at the same time, they've just been destroying Libra coin because they're scared that Libra coin could actually replace the dollar. They're not scared that Bitcoin could. So what that could mean is, I'm a big guy. I'm very open about this. I believe Bitcoin's more like gold than it's more like a currency. However, the point has been made up like, yeah, but you can still use gold as a currency too. I can say, Brad, those are some freaking sick headphones, dude. I love those blue headphones. Dude, if I gave you like 2 ounces of gold, would you hook it up? I don't know what 2 ounces of gold equals, but I assume it's probably worth more than those headphones. You'd be like, yeah, sure, take the headphones. So,
100%.
So we could see the U.S. government maybe pushing it more as a store of value and as gold. We could see it push it that direction to kind of keep the U.S. dollar, to stop the tech companies from creating a dollar 2.0. So I don't know. Maybe that could be where that belief comes in. We saw Steve Mnuchin said, some negative stuff about Bitcoin compared to cash, but we've seen plenty of, economic people in the U.S. government say favorable things about Bitcoin as well. So
we certainly have. And we've also seen a lot of people say favorable things, even in Congress at that level from the government, that perhaps need to go and read up on the cryptography, go and read up on blockchain, because many of them were just speaking off the cuff and didn't quite understand what they were talking about.
The last when Facebook was there, it seemed like a few of them had done some research. They definitely did not seem like idiots compared to the times before they had talked about it.
I agree. Some did. And I think some of them even articulated that they need to go and learn more, because it was just really the beginning for them to go and inquire.
So if you're a senator and you're watching the channel right now, I just dropped a poker chip. If you're a senator and you're watching the channel right now, then make sure to hit me up on the email. We'll have you on the show.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would love to see that.
I don't think there's really a senator watching right now, but if you are.
Oh, you'd be surprised, because I even, I was listening to the Congress to discuss the word shitcoin, and I was taken.
That was crazy.
That. But, it starts to really put forward a new narrative in that environment and discuss the real value of blockchain, the underpinnings of the ecosystem. I think that's very important, because many people don't know the blockchain's been in operation for quite some time, quite before crypto, in fact. But it's that coupling effect that's really got people talking, because money is involved in this ability to transmit, to transfer in a very seamless and a very autonomous way. And so the question now is, what do you think is going to happen in the future? Because we're definitely seeing a big push for digital currencies, for sovereign nations to start to get involved and dictate outcomes for utilizing the new digital, because digitization is nothing new, but this mechanism for a new era of digitization is now here. So will we see the emergence of a people's coin in some way, for transmittance of value, or will it be overpowered, do you think, by either corporates or those government interests?
Yeah, I think so. We'll have to end the interview here. I'll just end it like this, and I think that's a great topic to end it on, because that's a whole nother ball of wax. And I'm actually going to be doing a video this week on this very thing.
Awesome.
Thanks to Brad for giving me the idea. But I think it's definitely it is going to be a battle. We definitely have taken a lot of things for granted in cryptocurrency. We've talked about it's going to be tough, and that the governments don't want this, and we're trying to invert a power structure, but it's going to be hard, and it's going to be a bloody battle. There will be casualties. There already have been casualties. Facebook had this great idea to launch this Libra coin, and they're taking arrows to the back right now, and they're taking them, whether you like Facebook or not. They're taking them for all of cryptocurrency right now. So I do think that there is going to be a battle, and I do think that ultimately something hopefully will emerge that will be good for that. And so this week on my channel, we're going to be talking about what that battle might kind of look like. I think that's good for people to kind of understand, because just by having this channel, like I run a risk. I could be a target in the future for who knows what. I don't think someone's going to try to kill me, but obviously people who have YouTube channels are targets for hackers. But who knows? What the governments might think about this. But like I said, we'll talk more about this on my channel this week. And Brad, I'd definitely love to have you on again down the road.
100%, mate. And thank you for just having enough gumption to raise these questions, because as Andreas, argues, is that it all comes down to being brave and bold enough and brazen enough to really push forth the people's narrative, to make sure that you do have a financial voice in what is new technology. Because if we don't have this now, we will literally miss that crypto boat, and corporates and governments will certainly be the major players, much like that binary party system that we and its bifurcated party system. We want to change that narrative. We want to be part of it. You're part of that, Ben, and I'm definitely going to be watching your video when you talk about what is a very important conversation to have about what we can actually contribute beyond just putting our money into crypto and making some back.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's more about that. You know, if it was just about making money, I would have been out of this a long time ago. So
Me too.
Well,
brother.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys make sure to check out his channel. I'll put his link down below in the video description. And we look forward to having you on again sometime, and hopefully meeting you in person at some point. So thanks for coming on.
100%. No worries, man. Thank you again.
Okay. We'll see you guys later. Big boy out.